Our cybersecurity network intrusion happened even though we had taken every precaution possible. We were attacked on a DDoS, distributed denial of service. So we reached out to Comcast, and Comcast had a phenomenal solution. The software we have in place, thanks to Comcast, is now monitoring our network. Believe you me, it has made my life good.
Good evening. How are you tonight? Let's try it again. How are you tonight? There we go. Hi, I'm Alicia Crank. I'm the Executive Director of Seattle City Club. Welcome to our first Civic Cocktail of 2024. I was also reminded earlier today that this is actually our 1-year anniversary of doing Civic Cocktail here. So our first one was February of last year. So we've been here, we love it. Thankfully, they love us. So I am very much looking forward to tonight's topic. I think we have some great speakers tonight, and I hope that if you signed up tonight and you're still in town next month, that you come to the second half, because that was going to be a really great tie-in to what we do tonight. So first, we're going to do a little housekeeping. First, we'll have 2 segments with a 10-minute break in the middle, so don't worry, there will be a libation break for you to restock up. I do want to thank the staff of the collective, Bermudez Media, and who I want to say thanks, and to our Civic Cocktail major sponsor, which is Comcast. So without them, we would not be able to put on this programming tonight. I also want to thank our special partner for this 2-part Democracy and Technology series, WTIA. So they're around here tonight. So if you're familiar with them or want to learn more, Terrence Stevenson, who's with WTIA, is in the audience, and I'm sure it would be great to want to talk to you during that break. I also want to give a shout out to our new CEO members. Are you in the house? I love it. If you're not familiar, City Club has restarted our membership program. We're already at 32 people just in 1 month. So that's like 1 a day. That's great. And there also are ones for organizations as well. So shout out to Edelman and Visit Seattle and Fred Hutch for coming on as civically engaged organizations with Seattle City Club. And then finally, I want to thank our moderator, who has given us so much of his time in prepping for this tonight, Dr. Paul Petrie, who is the chancellor at WSU Everett. So please, round one. And of course, I'm playing a little bit of favoritism because they're up in Snohomish County, where I live. But again, just want to illustrate that we are a regional organization. We are making sure to include all of our neighbors within King and Snohomish County. So with that, I am going to hand the show over to Dr. Petrie. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Alicia. And it's a pleasure to be able to moderate this conversation on 2 topics that are so vitally important to our community, to our state, and to our nation. And as we move into this election cycle, it makes it even that much more important that we gain an understanding of these 2 important areas. So with that, I would like to give our distinguished panel a chance to introduce themselves. And on my notes here, I have Omari first. So,
hello, good evening. My name is Omari Salisbury. I'm the co-founder of Converge Media here in Seattle.
Okay. And then Sara.
Hi, I'm Sara Schacht, and I've worked in the field of open government as a consultant and nonprofit leader for 20 years and engaged with disinformation from a different angle as a result. Thanks.
And Taija.
Hi, everyone. I'm Taija PerryCook, and I'm a reporter at Snopes.
Okay. So what I'd like to start by doing is just giving you each about 30 seconds just to give us a little bit of a deeper understanding of the kind of work that you're doing now. And why don't we start with you, Taija?
Sure. So I've worked as a reporter in a few different settings. Some in Seattle. Last winter, I worked down in the Capitol doing legislative correspondence for Crosscut. And currently, the work that I'm doing primarily revolves around debunking internet rumors. Those can be in-depth, widespread rumors that take days or even weeks to debunk, and some you can do in an hour. It really depends on the day, and every day is a different topic. We cover pretty much everything. Right now, it's getting deeper into election news. So today, did a story on Nikki Haley and Nevada results. Tomorrow will be who knows. That's my work. Yeah.
Excellent. Sara, can you give us a little bit more about your work?
Sure. So my most recent project I was on was building the first certificate program for congressional staff allowed by House and Senate ethics. And that was called Data Skills for Congress, sponsored and developed by USAFAX based here in Seattle. And that program was really to build skills within a wide spectrum of congressional staff on accessing data, policies that would help government, federal government be more transparent, open, interactive, and modern with its information. So it was really interesting to have a cross-section of congressional staff I was working with to level up on knowledge that would help the U.S. Create a better information environment, and oftentimes disinformation or resourcing around accurate information and data came up as a result.
Thank you. Omari.
Yeah, so Converge Media, we are the leader in this part of America. Our goal is to be the leader in uplifting and telling the story of the Black experience in the Pacific Northwest through video and film. Based in the Central District of Seattle, where we started our reaches across the Pacific Northwest. We cover a lot of news things, but for the most part, our investment is in the uplift, where we like to say that the mainstream media, they have a monopoly on bad news. That's where they put their investment: helicopter, satellite uplinks, wire services. And most times, Black people are the beneficiary of that investment because what we see is bad news. And so at Converge, we put paint where it ain't. And we've found a great lane in being able to tell stories about our community and communities throughout the region, and not just our communities, but that, and we do a lot of coverage around government, especially here within the city of Seattle.
All right, thank you. Okay, let's get started. My first question is, just to kind of level set, what's the difference between misinformation and disinformation?
I could speak to that briefly. So misinformation is typically when you get the facts wrong. It's not necessarily intentional, and it happens all the time in the age of the internet. Whereas disinformation has more of a malintention. There's actual purpose in misleading people for personal gain or financial benefit, for example.
Okay, anything else to add?
Maybe I can give an example of where disinformation led to misinformation as well. So after the fires in Maui, there was a rapid rise of disinformation online, and later reporting and research would find that disinformation that was causing a lot of challenges for both government and for residents. That disinformation was launched by a state actor of that disinformation. It was incredibly divisive and worrisome for folks, and it then spread as misinformation between individuals, whether that's in a personal conversation or reposting on Facebook, and where that state-targeted action became something that was much more in the grapevine of the community.
Thank you. So how and why are we so easily misled by this false information?
I mean, y'all act like that's something new. People been getting misled from jump. I mean, and we can just look here in Seattle when it comes to media. I mean, you go back into the history of the Seattle. Actually, misinformation on a government level at one time, or disinformation, black people were 3/5 of a human being. That was the state actors giving disinformation, right? Here locally, you can go back to the archives of something like the Seattle Times. You go back decades and you see disinformation about black people in articles and even advertising, the Coon Cafe and things like that. You know what I'm saying? So disinformation by the government or disinformation by media is absolutely nothing new. So it might be at a higher level now. And as somebody here who, you know, if you grew up black in Seattle or a lot of cities across America, the legacy media was part and parcel of disinformation, 100%. And so it's good now that everybody else is like, oh, disinformation, misinformation. But you know what? We have been the beneficiary in a bad way of disinformation from jump through media sources and government.
Thank you.
If I could speak to that as well, I think people see what they want to see and they hear what they want to hear. In the thread of international disaster, following October 7th, there was massive amounts of dis and misinformation, and that was around the time that I joined Snopes. And I think really making an effort to go and report in the interest of facts is absolutely vital. You know, it's not always the most popular stories, and I think that's where you know you're hitting something good, when it doesn't get as much traction as some story about Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce or something crazy that Trump said or something. That's not going to get the traction that those stories get, but I think that's even more telling that it's needed. When you have everything to lose and very little to gain, sometimes those are the most vital stories our community needs.
I was just going to tap in real quick. Travis Kelce, here's an example of misinformation. They're saying that he came up with this haircut, the fade. And even he had to debunk that. He's like, man, this is really a really popular haircut in the black community. It's the fade, but now it's the Kelce haircut. It's like it's misinformation. Just, you know, and a funny thing we can laugh about, but you see at all different levels of where these things pop up.
They didn't say that he came up with the fade.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's a crazy. People going to barbershops, they're saying they want the Travis Kelce cut and everything. And, you know, Travis Kelce made it light. He was like, man, how y'all gonna do this during Black History Month? No, one ain't come up with no fade.
Okay. Anything to add, Sara?
No, I think that was great.
Okay. So there's this term that we hear a lot, the deep fake. What is a deep fake, and who is responsible for them?
Yeah, so I know we got cyber experts in here. You know, don't hold it against. I mean, in a layman's term, it's just like using computer technology to, you know what? When I first saw the movie JFK, you know, I mean, we see examples of deepfake in Hollywood, but we don't think about it. Or remember Forrest Gump. Forrest Gump, he was hanging there with Nixon. And Nixon's like, oh, let me see your gunshot wound. Let me see this and that. So we've seen this in Hollywood for years. And now it's really like coming down to, you know, a level of the average person or somebody maybe a bit smarter than me can figure out how to now take my likeness, my image, and create, you know, all kinds of different things out of it. You see, they just, down there in Texas, there was a company that they're looking at that did the robocalls that had them calling people in New Hampshire with Biden's voice saying like, yeah, don't go vote. You know what I'm saying? And so we see it. And I think it's called deep fake. You know, we can all kind of do a regular fake these days, almost it, but the deep fake, it looks real. And it's very hard to discern between what you're seeing and actually also what you're hearing. And it can be used to be funny. They did something with George Carlin. He's been dead. Now George Carlin's back and he's joking about stuff. But of course, at the highest level, when someone's impersonating the president of the United States on a phone call.
Yeah, I think deepfakes are incredibly concerning, ranging from a recent case that was in the news this week where an individual at a corporation had a call with several members of his team on Zoom. And ultimately, it was decided to make a $25 million transfer, I believe, to a client. In fact, the employee was not on a call with several of his team members. They had been completely faked. The video, the voices. So at that level of deep fake feels very personal. But that one person being a target. But I think we can all think of people in our community and our families who have forwarded us something that is a video of someone talking very persuasively and emotionally that was perhaps generated with AI and requires us to have another level of investigation on, like, where is this coming from? Why are they trying to provoke this kind of response from me? And on the robocalls, I remember working in Iowa for a presidential campaign in 2003. And while there wasn't AI technology then, we certainly experienced quite destructive push polling that played to people's racism or biases. And that was really startling to encounter, and now the technology layer that's been put on top of it, making them even more convincing.
Well, maybe more on the topic of AI. I don't know if you have a different question for that.
What's that?
For more AI,
AI, you
related,
can-
like imagery. Yeah, every day we come across AI imagery that goes viral, and it's incredibly convincing, as well as deepfakes. And it's interesting because once you see them every single day, you start to see patterns, and you can pretty much tell when something's off. But if you're new to the internet, if you're new to AI imagery, it's really hard to tell. I think we all have a personal responsibility to be able to recognize those things before, at least before spreading it to others. You can get extensions on your Chrome browser and have it scan imagery. I mean, it's not always perfect, but little tools like that really help. Yeah.
So what are the potential impacts on our marginalized and our vulnerable communities? No, no, I'm looking at you all.
I mean, first of all, it seems like it was a big impact on somebody who wasn't marginalized in this $25 million transfer. So it might not necessarily just be impact on people who are marginalized and most vulnerable. But, I will say that, mis and disinformation, the thing is, and especially when you're talking about when you're layering it in with AI and social media, it's an equal opportunity. I mean, when you look at COVID, we worked closely with public health, Seattle, King County, and we saw the trends. We saw that, okay, there was people who just didn't know about this vaccine or whatever, and, they're indifferent. And then we saw people, of course, who got the shot. And then we saw groups who came in with clear mis and disinformation because they had their agenda about vaccines and everything else. And, it wasn't so much that they took advantage of someone being marginalized or poor. They took advantage of people, one, who were unaware of everything about the vaccine or might have had, similar feelings and everything else. And then they found that wedge, and then they exploded in that wedge. And that's what we saw. We tracked that in our specific community here across King County, how different actors came in and found different ways to manipulate information to turn consensus in certain, groups and ethnic groups against, anything that public health was trying to communicate.
Yeah, sometimes I think about our seniors as well, and how susceptible are they to a deep fake or misinformation.
Yeah, but I mean, again, I would agree there. But what's even worse is a lot of times when the people are just calling our seniors and trying to sell them some crap warranty over the phone, they're talking, that's low tech. You know what I'm saying? Or another one where unfortunately our cherished community elders get taken advantage of is title fraud. That's low tech. So, I hear what you're saying, but just in the here and now, I know we're talking about a pending threat that's coming down the corner. Our cherished elders are getting taken advantage of right now with low tech as well.
Yeah, I was going to say about the senior community too, our cherished elder community. I think it's one of the most vulnerable groups in my experience in this reporting. There's even sites, there's countless satire sites. We all know like The Onion, but there's other sites out there that are really able to post whatever they want and are not really held accountable legally because they have a disclaimer tab on their website or even in their bio if it's a social media account. And so people end up sharing really, outlandish rumors and theories, not having any clue that it's completely made up and it's just made for ad revenue. So all of us should be making sure our cherished elders are aware of this. And, we grew up with the internet. My generation, definitely, the internet grew up with us. But I think it's different if you grew up with a better, a more trusting relationship with the news.
Definitely.
I would say that like the work that Omari just described is life-saving work, and that we're very lucky to have that work in our community because when you start looking at, especially like late pandemic stats on regions and demographics who were deeply persuaded by COVID mis and disinformation, there's real impacts on who survived, who has higher long COVID rates. So a recent study came out on long COVID finding Oklahoma and Texas and Hawaii are the highest long COVID rates. You look at who had higher death rates in populations. And many times, not always, it overlaps with some of the studies that have been done on political perspectives and how different members of a political spectrum absorb information and how critical they are or how much they investigate information. So both on the liberal end of the spectrum and the conservatives, there are segments who are more likely to resonate with emotionally triggering disinformation around public health and more likely to share it. And I believe looking at those various studies and mapping, it's striking to see how those communities might have been impacted in terms of longevity and health by the disinformation that was awash in their communities.
And if I just add in real quick, these guys are slick too, at least around COVID, right? Because it was never like, yeah, man, don't get the vaccine, it's crap, or trying to battle science, mRNA, and all that kind of stuff. What they were able to do is see that people were discontent with government, right? For a lot of different things. Even in our state, remember the unemployment computer crashed, people didn't get their checks, it's this and that. And so they just put a little bit of truth in there. You see what I'm saying? And that truth had nothing to do with COVID. It had to do with like, man, the government's lied to us, or this and that. And everybody's like, yeah, I really do feel like government's letting us down. And then from there, there was the breadcrumbs into, into everything else. And that's how they were able to kind of get to. So the first layer of defense around COVID communications, people were kind of like, okay, I get that. And so they analyzed how, at least in our community here in King County, was responding around COVID, and they looked for a way to penetrate in there because it was massive communication about, COVID, do this and that. And they found these breaches and they found their way in, and their way in was discontent with government. And then from there, once inside, it was like, and it blew up.
I'd like to riff on that. So when I was at Beeck Center at Georgetown, I conducted a study on COVID open data and COVID data, and had the opportunity to interview about 25 different jurisdictions around the United States, including the Pacific Northwest, of public health teams that were in charge of COVID data. And I don't know if you remember clicking every minute to see the COVID data dashboards, right? So these were the folks who were in charge of them and in charge of doing massive intake of data, oftentimes in just hard copy documents from doctors' offices on COVID tests. But what was striking in that research that tells me like there's maybe some hope for governments or a path forward on making improvement in scenarios that you just talked about. There was 3 county governments who had received a 2010 grant for a decade-long grant for having a public health informatics employee, someone who is both skilled in public health and also in data management and collection and coding. And these county governments were able to respond faster than their peers. They were able to get out accurate information and emerging information to their citizens and residents way ahead of the state, who frankly their states were oftentimes putting out lagging or confusing information. And they were able to get ahead of misinformation bubbling up in the community that was playing off of biases within the community. So one county in Oregon told me that there was a lot of local opposition to the colleges, the public universities, students coming back to campus because they thought that the students were the major spreader of COVID. And it turned out from their testing, no, it was actually the 28 to 42-year-old demographic in their community who was most likely to spread COVID and also likely had kids at home. So sharing that information dialed down the rhetoric in their community and helped them be more, just foster a better environment for their community at that time.
Thank you. Do we have time for one more question, or do?
Yeah, go to Q&A at some point.
Okay. So my question is, so who should have more responsibility for disinformation, deepfakes, these types of things? Should it be government? Should it be the private sector, or should it be civic communities? What are your thoughts? How do we get more control over information or misinformation?
I mean, I think in many ways, good journalism should operate like a mini democracy within the newsroom, within the community. I think it's absolutely crucial we hold each other accountable. There's been stories I've written where people will write back to me, they'll write to my email and they'll say, I think this is missing some context. I think, the story could really be enriched with this piece of information. And, we will consider what people write back. You have a role to play in what journalists produce and what stays on the internet. And I think we all have a responsibility to hold each other to high standards as a means to end mis and disinformation when possible.
Yeah, I would say, government lies to us all the time on every level. You know what I'm saying? So, I don't want to paint the brush too broadly, but I'm just saying that, man, for me, one of the biggest things when we challenge our community is stop being lazy. And people need to, no one wants to call out the consumer of the information for being lazy. You know what I'm saying? If you really want, my mama used to make me sit down, I read the newspaper. You know what I'm saying? Or we would go places where people couldn't read and we'd read the newspaper to them, and, we'd put it in some context sometimes. But, the thing is people have become, they want fast food everything, even fast food news. Oh, what's this on Twitter? This, that. Man, challenge yourself to be an informed consumer of information. And if you're an informed consumer of information, those little things from back in elementary school will come out. Like, man, let me find another source to this. Who, what, when, where, why, how? You know what I'm saying? But we're lazy now, especially in America, and that's why so much media is dying, and it's this and that and everything else. We don't have a willingness to support and consume real journalism that's out there. We have a willingness to support and share and everything else, the shiny object on the internet. You know what I'm saying? And it's the laziness of people who are consuming information that are the biggest spreaders of mis and disinformation. I'm not seeing people sharing these articles that are 300-400 words, 2,000 words that are here as a quotable person, and you can find that person and maybe this quote somewhere else. People are just sharing things. Oh, this is cool. Or it's aligned with their ideology. All this. See, I knew those people were doing that. Let me share this. So we, the people, are the biggest stakeholders, and we the people have the most to lose by us not being engaged and holding ourselves accountable into the news and information that we consume and we share. There's always been this misinformation out there, but there used to be more of a willingness of the people to want to be informed, to have informed discussions, to, hey, did you see this article? I saw this article. Man, did you see there in the 5th paragraph? Or did you see down there in the 8th paragraph? That's missing. So, you know, I don't know how we bring that back, but it's very American of us to be like, well, it's government needs to do this, so the county needs to do that. We need to ask ourselves what we can be doing every day.
Well said.
I think government has a role in providing accurate information online that is easy to access, easy to search. Like the number of governments who still send out crucial information in PDF is shameful. And like government does things that are kind of based on their habits or their tech stack that make information getting for the public more difficult. So that's one. I think we all need to be supporters of journalism, big and small journalism. I'm shocked by the examples I've heard of in my personal, like in civic life, of stories that almost didn't get told because a company didn't want that story to be told and was threatening litigation. And so sometimes I worry about our large legacy media, as much as we have problems with it, their coverage or their editorials, them having a legal team to defend their journalism is increasingly important. And then I think, yeah, we as individuals have to be more accountable in how we're engaging. But, you know, like, yes, people are lazy, but I also think that there's sometimes not as many opportunities in our educational track or our work track where we learn the skills to interrogate information. And so we need to find more places than are like the comfortable spots like this for the civic-minded join. We need to, like if we run a business, maybe we need to have, you know, opportunities for folks to engage in civic literacy and media literacy, these sort of things, because the likelihood that more of us are just sucked into mis and disinformation makes it harder for all of us to do the things that we care about and live in the kind of society we want to.
Thank you. Well, I think we're ready to move to questions.
To each one of you, I would like to ask you this question. How do we as individuals within the media and that work with media and work with information, how do we focus our colleagues on this issue? I mean, I've lobbied every major corporate media and alternative media in this country on this issue that we're ranked 45th in the world in terms of press freedom, mainly because of corporate media monopolies, which you know limit the amount of information we get. How do we as people in this field make and inspire our colleagues to do the right thing and finally take on this mission that we all should know from the beginning as our job as journalists?
How do we do that? How do we inspire folks to take up the charge?
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's only so many hours in the day for us. So, I mean, I guess, I mean, and I'm not saying that to be funny, but like, man, for us, what we can do is we can set an example and hope that people go from there, right? You know, I don't really do a lot of public. It's just Alicia got me out here tonight, you know, because this is an hour I could be spending with young people in our community, teaching them how to use a camera. You see what I'm saying? Or teaching them how to write an article, or teaching them how to do a podcast. So I stopped doing speaking like 2 years ago because I was like, man, listen, I'm gonna spend my time in my community. But one thing that we did that we find year after year that's valuable, and we did this work as journalists, is that people in Seattle don't understand the budget, right? And so then you get this talk, and it's like, oh, it's a budget deficit, and then it's like, oh, there's this payroll tax and whatever, and the average person doesn't understand. So me and Kevin Schofield, almost 3 years ago, we did a TV series called Budget School, and it was 10 episodes, and we took everybody through budget school. this is what happens, X, Y, and Z. And I'm amazed that even now, people are like, come up and they're like, oh, you know, and we'll go, somebody's at a community meeting and they're talking about, oh, we need, you know, funds, resources, budget. And they go to this budget school, to this document, and then they can be informed participants in our city government because they now understand. No one's talking over their head anymore. They went to school. And now they know how to lobby their city council member. They know how things pass through and everything else. And what we can do at Converge Media is we can make a more informed citizen. And we can, with that being informed, we can now challenge them to engage in the process. We're never going to tell them you should ask for this money for that budget or that money for that budget. That's not our job. But our job is to tell them, this is how this budget works. This is how it impacts you. This is how these communities over here always have nice stuff and you guys don't have shit, because they know how the budget process works. And creating tools that, you know, are going to last for years and years and years. And so me, I don't get out and I'm not beating the drum to other journalists. Hey, I'm trying to inspire you. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to inspire and empower my community. And hopefully by doing that, maybe that will rub off on other people.
Do you bring it to the schools?
Not yet. To actual schools, not yet. But it's a, you know, that's a great idea. But it's a lot of community groups and things like that who you got to think, a few months ago that everything was fine for them, but now they realize, oh, you know what, our group needs this, or we need funding for that, or, you know, we need this, or fentanyl in our neighborhood, or homeless for our neighborhood, and then they know now how to talk to city government.
Any other response? We're about ready to wrap up.
To answer the question, I think it's hard to fight against press restrictions that are coming into play again and again. Like, if you watch the news on journalists who've had blowback or been arrested by local police officers or sheriffs, like just doing their job, it's deeply alarming to see in the United States. In parallel, we've seen in Washington State, we've seen rollback of many of our open government rights and required processes at the state level and the city and the county level. And that's mostly come through liberal electeds who, if you ask them, very much support democracy. But in practice, they also, I think, support their own power. And so I think we as citizens have to have more eyes on that. But also, all of this is hard to do when you don't have resources. And journalism is struggling to have the resources it needs to do the job. And so I was reading through some studies prior to this, and some of the recommendations around fighting back on disinformation are to have public financing of journalism. And I thought of the democracy vouchers that we have here in Seattle, and how maybe as a piece of that barrier against misinformation, that we have a kind of media voucher in the city, so that folks can put dollars towards media and shore up our small and large scale media in Washington State.
All right, well, thank you. I think we need to wrap up. Let's give our panel a round of applause.
Thank you very much, you guys. We're going to stay on stage for a second. We're going to take a brief 10-minute break and come back to our cybersecurity discussion. So we'll see you in a few minutes. Okay, everybody, welcome back to the second part of our program tonight. We're going to talk more about cybersecurity. And this is actually one I'm very interested in, and I hope that our moderator will also maybe talk about how cybersecurity affects the education system. So I'm sure that was already in your repertoire. So, so just a reminder, we hope that if you're not a member of City Club, that you will consider doing that tonight. There are these fun little cards that are floating around with a QR code that you can sign up right now. And for those who are already members or sign up tonight, make sure to take your awesome water bottle that we have for you, thanks to our friends at Alaska Airlines. So we give you stuff. So with that, I will turn it back over to Dr. Petrie, and we will get into the conversation about cybersecurity.
Okay, well, I'll have our esteemed panel introduce themselves, and we'll start off with Sara.
Thanks, Paul. Good evening, everyone. My name is Sara Bromling. I'm currently the technical manager at Microsoft Intelligence Security Association. Prior to that, I worked at a cybersecurity company in their SOC as a security analyst. And I didn't want to run down my resume, but as I was walking up here, I did hear someone in the audience say that there's some Year Up representation here. I was also previously the IT instructor for that org, so it's nice to see that org represented here tonight.
All right, Dr. Liu.
Okay, I'm Shih-Lien Liu, but I go by Linus. It's Lucy's little baby brother with the security blankets. It's kind of related security. I'm a first-generation immigrant, but now currently teaching at Washington State University, Everett, on cybersecurity.
All right, and then we have Doug Shadel.
Doug Shadel. I'm spent 15 years as a fraud investigator for the State Attorney General's office, and the last 120 years at AARP. I was the state director for the last 20 years at AARP Washington, where we focused a lot on cyber security education for our members.
Okay, so Doug, can you tell us a little bit about some of the projects you're working on currently?
Currently, I'm doing consulting, speaking for AARP, going around the country talking about fraud prevention. I also do consulting for a company called Nomo Robo. Some of you may have heard of it. It's a call blocking app that you can put on your phone that blocks unwanted robocalls. And the thing that's really drew me to them is they monitor 350,000 phone lines. Actually, I do this now, looking for various emerging scams. And so that gives us the ability to theoretically do an early warning kind of system for the public. And we've done a number of those where, in fact, the New Hampshire phone call, I found sitting in my house in Burien. I mean, other people found it too, but it was part of this monitoring system where they just millions and millions of calls come in. They monitor them to block them for you so it doesn't come onto your phone. But my interest is, as a researcher and fraud researcher, what are the trends? And just one I'll mention is, years ago we did a study of the kind of calls that come into people's homes, and overwhelmingly it was, you've won money, the promise of wealth, right? You've won the jackpot. Now it's almost all fear. There's a virus on your computer, someone stole your social security card, fear, fear, fear. And in an age of anxiety, it works better. People respond to it better. But it really is disturbing to see. So.
And then the end result is that they want them to spend money or send money?
Yeah, I mean, it's a typical example. One of the ones that I worked on, for any of you who's interested in this, I won't talk long about it, but there's a guy named Jim Browning who I met a couple years ago. He's on YouTube. Go on YouTube and we'll look at Jim Browning. Jim Browning is an IT guy who decided to become a vigilante against these tech support scams. And what he does is he lures them in by acting interested. Yeah, you can remote access into my computer, and when they open that channel, he reverse accesses his way into their computer and downloads software that allows him to video and audio tape everything the scam boiler room is doing, including hacking into the closed circuit television cameras. When I first saw this a couple years ago, I couldn't stop watching it. And since then, he's you know, I didn't think he'd call me back. I reached out to him thinking he's got 4.5 million YouTube followers. He's not going to call me back. The reason he did is that YouTube tells him the average viewer of those subscribers is a 24-year-old male, yet all of the victims are seniors. So he's not reaching. He wants to stop this. So we've done articles from AARP about it, and he's let me tag along, and it's really interesting. So I would commend that to you. Just, you know.
Wow. Thank you. Dr. Liu, can you tell us a little bit about the cybersecurity program at WSU? We know it's a growing field. It's an area of education that's so important to our community and our economy. Can you talk a little bit about WSU's program in Everett and its focus and maybe how it came about?
Sure, yeah, thank you. Yeah, WSU Everett started this program not long ago as a brand new program. I'm also brand new, pretty new. And I'm excited about this program because it is an opportunity to educate the next generation people to, beef up the cybersecurity infrastructure. And, we have many faculties on different campuses, and we try to cover many different grounds on cybersecurity, because security is a very difficult, challenging topic. You have to prevent every possible not thought of when you first design it. So it is a very challenging topic, and it's challenging field, but it's very demanding and very needed field. So educating these next generation workforce is a very important topic. And then we're building up this program, and we're trying to outreach to students who have interest in STEM. Ever since from the beginning, there will be do a quick advertisement. There will be a girls exploring STEM. On March 2nd, it's a free event. Any girls from 6th grade to 12th grade, you're welcome to sign up for this. And I lead a sessions on cybersecurity, teaching about encryption, decryption.
Excellent, thank you. Sara, so you're currently working Microsoft?
Correct.
Okay. And but you've also worked at the Washington Technology Industry Association?
I did have the opportunity a few years ago to participate in, I first got involved as a participant in the ION project, which was a cross-sector collaboration project hosted by the WTIA. At the time, I was in the nonprofit sector and represented nonprofit, and then shortly moved into the technology corporate field. And then after that, I had the opportunity to facilitate with the WTIA across the, I believe, 3 or 4 cohorts after that. So I believe that does tie into maybe one of your later questions about how does the public and government sector play this role in cybersecurity, and my answer would be those cross-sector collaboration opportunities and partnerships.
So you were working with the WTIA, kind of a cross-sector group?
Correct.
Okay, excellent. And so what about Microsoft? What are you working on now?
Currently, I'm the technical manager for the MISA team, which is it's a co-marketing association for our top security partners in the industry. I work directly with our myriad of security product teams and connecting our security partners in building integrations and solutions together.
Okay. So what makes us vulnerable? This is for all of you. What makes us vulnerable to cyber attacks, and does social media play a role in this?
Yes. Yes, it does. I don't know. That's a long question for somebody who's studied this for a long time. But one thing on the social media front, one thing we know is that scammers are targeting these interest groups, like fan clubs. I was on the phone. We have a call center that has victims calling, and person called in and said that they were at the Keanu Reeves fan club on Facebook for a number of months, and she was contacted by the manager for Keanu Reeves, who said, I've got a foundation, we're raising money, but he can't do it directly. And you've been on our fan club and you're part of our group, right? So her suspicions are down, and she ended up giving $60,000 to a non-existent foundation before finding out that. So, you know, and one of the things I wanted to comment about the previous panel talking about us being lazy, and I think I'm guilty of that to some degree, but there is this concept in social science called the cognitive miser. Human beings are cognitive misers. We are always looking for spending the least amount of time thinking about something before making a decision. I mean, all of us, not just a couple lazy people. It's just human nature. So to defend human beings a little bit, but the difficulty is that is even more so now that we're in such a complex information environment where we're overwhelmed. There's never been a time where I wanted to take a shortcut more than now. And the scammers will play off that by raising your emotions. We did a study 2 years ago. What is the number one thing that makes people vulnerable? It turns out that it is having had some kind of a stressful life event in the preceding 12 months before the encounter, in which you're coping, and the theory behind it, I guess, is you're coping with the death of a spouse. This is not just older people either. All ages, this was true. They had twice as many negative life events in the 12 months prior to falling prey compared to a group that was confronted but resisted, you know? And so that means this can happen to any of us, because who hasn't had a stressful life event, you know? So.
Sure. I think that social media definitely plays into cybersecurity vulnerabilities. A lot of us are very careless about sharing of information, our private, data on social media, and then the scammers, or in technical term we call it threat actors, would collect these informations and use these information as a way to get into security loopholes. For example, a particular attack called your SIM card in your phone, SIM swap attack. Basically, the scammer or the attacker collects enough information, personal information about you, and then call your service provider and saying that, hey, I'm you, but I lost my phone. I need to replace it. My phone is SIM card, and the service provider will send the person a new SIM card or something, and then from there on, all these cybersecurity defenses, multi-factor authentications, all these other things falls into the wayside, and they just got hold of everything that you have because we're depending on so much on phones nowadays.
Anything else to add?
I guess I'll just reiterate that yes, it definitely ties into cybersecurity, and social media companies are not exempt from data breaches, which present privacy risks for the individual. And I'll also kind of, when you asked that question, I thought back to the current the hearings that are happening in the Senate around social media and the harmfulness towards youth, and the vector that it does allow for not just harassment and cyberbullying, but also social engineering and allowing bad actors to access not just our youth but us ourselves.
Yeah, that's so. How do we improve our security, and is there a trade-off between security and privacy?
I will just say that that's very complex and nuanced. Security and privacy definitely have a very interconnected relationship, and in order to achieve security, most of the time, if not always, it's required to access our data, and which gives into this kind of this balancing act of in order to achieve a certain threshold of security, some privacy needs to be given up.
Yeah, and I agree that somehow because we need to achieve certain security, there definitely will be some loss in privacy. Just use the multi-factor authentications, right? Somehow you're losing that part of privacy that you own that phone, right? And then sometimes these apps actually can trace where you are because where your phones are, right? Where your phone is, and then so that's the trade-off between privacy and security. And also, for example, Microsoft, in order to protect the app, the software that runs, I'm not picking on Microsoft, by the way. I'm just saying that there's a big software vendor, and then they put these apps and on the store, or maybe Apple puts in the apps app, whatever, and that needs to be certified, and also that they have to, these companies, they are not authorized certificate verification people, and then but they can be the men in the middle. I don't want to use technical terms. Just they could play a role in getting information, or scan your computer, or scan your phones, because they have the capabilities, right, to get into your system, and then that's a path for them to get to you, and then you have to then judge and wait. Do I, make sure that all the apps runs on my phones and my computer is secure, or do I give out this scanning probabilities or possibilities to these big companies? Yeah.
I thought you were going to ask, and maybe it's related to this, the trade-off between convenience and security is another one, which is, vendors with good intentions, I'm sure, are hoping to make life easier for you. But the easier it is, the riskier it is in some ways. One thing I just wanted to say, and by the way, a plug for Microsoft, we've been doing cyber prevention workshops, AARP has, with Microsoft since 1993. So they have been on board this, and every year someone from Microsoft comes and we drag them to our meetings, and they're there for us. But a question we often get is, how do I know that my name isn't on the dark web, or that somebody has stolen my identity? And I say to them, someone has. Every single person in this room's identity has been stolen. Sorry. The question is, what are we going to do about it? And is it converted from identity theft to identity fraud? Identity theft doesn't mean you lost any money. I interviewed a guy a couple years ago who was a dark web, one of the first dark web people, and he goes, I can find your wife's social security number and birth date and pay $2 for it on the dark web. And I'm like, no, you can't. He took us on the dark web, and in 5 minutes, he found my wife's social security number and birth date. Everything's on there. The question is, how do we empower consumers to monitor our bank accounts? And this is the good news. Technology got us into this. Technology can get us out of it. There's so many inexpensive apps and technology solutions. I find myself preaching this sort of harden the target message, which is AI is going to make it even harder to find out who's legit and who's not legit. But get a call blocking app so that they don't call you to begin with, so you don't have to know whether it's legit or not. And get a pop-up blocker and freeze your credit for free, which is now free. There's all these tools that are out there that can empower you. And if a hacker or a bad guy, this guy I interviewed, if he really wanted to get me, he could, which is why I was really nice to him. Somebody has to really, so just don't pick a fight with a hacker. That's my advice.
Well, that was really my next question, just hackers. I think everybody in here has been hacked in some way, probably. How do they get access to our information, and both on the personal level and then based on organizations or businesses that we have our information with? How do they get us?
I guess the first few things that come to mind are data breaches, social engineering, as I mentioned before, phishing, and both kind of used in tandem with each other. And I guess in the physical world. I'm just thinking shoulder surfing. I mean, that's why it's kind of very important to be aware and vigilant of
Shoulder surfing?
somebody peeking over your shoulder while you're typing it in, or when they tell you for your PIN to be aware. That's a real risk. So
That's a good one. I haven't heard that. Shoulder surfing.
Side channel, the technical term, side channel. Yeah, it's a channel that we're not supposed to be viewed. Yeah, I think just to add on that a lot of times we as users sometimes just, you were saying that the, sorry, remind me again. Oh, okay. I'm kind of lost some my train of thoughts. Oh, so the thing is about this attack is that we as consumers are usually users that Doug was talking about, that we have been hacked already. I mean, all our information has been lost already, and whether or not that is just a ways to lose some of the financial things. And there is a dark web, and people actually use dark web. Now I'm coming back to my thoughts, sorry. The people are using dark web. There are two different levels of attackers, threat actors, and some actually just produce these things to sell on the web. And these are the higher two food chain people. And there's also just the people who buy these informations and then try to really break the law. So, and it depends how big a fish you are, and there might be different levels of risk. And then the highest risk is between nations, right? So I worked for a company called TSMC for 5 years, and that produced 90% of the advanced silicons in the world. And this is why, U.S. government wants to move this particular company's capabilities of manufacturing high advanced silicons to United States, because 100 miles away from another country that we are competing with, quote unquote, is not the safest place to put your all your eggs in one basket. Yeah. Sorry.
I was just going to say one thing about hacking, and I think you were mentioning this when we were back in the back room there, that 90% of the breaches that happen because a human being opened the door to that system. Very few of them, and I asked this guy from the dark web, can you hack into anybody's? And he goes, yeah, I could. I could break the code and break your password, but it's too much work when I could just call the person up and trick them into letting me in, right? Remote access in because I've got a virus on my computer, or the phishing scams that are every other email. So that's why the education of the employees in these companies and our folks who are even retirees is so important, because it's human frailty that does it.
Yeah. In fact, I heard a story of one person who was a hacker who basically would just talk to people and learn so much information from them that he would use it to decipher their passwords.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So back to a question that you mentioned earlier, just does the government play a role in this? The private sector? How do we get our hands around cybersecurity?
I think we do see a direct role that government plays when it comes to cybersecurity. I mean, we see it in the legislation being enacted or proposed. And the government definitely has a direct responsibility when it comes to national security and defense, and a responsibility to our critical infrastructure and operational technology, such as power plants that are subject to cyber attacks.
Yeah, I think the security needs a collaboration from all sectors, basically. So government has a role. Government actually puts a lot of efforts in there. There are institutions like NSA. They are very good at security. Believe me, they are very good. They come up with all these algorithms that they have they have a lot of smart people, and they put a lot of efforts into protecting, and they really care about, all the challenging problems. They spend a lot of money on quantum computing to avoid these post-quantum encryption, decryption type of things. So NIST, National Institutes of Standard and Technology, that is also a government-sponsored institution that actually publish informations about how to protect yourself. The other organizations and institutions and like gather people from different fields and different parts, and they actually publish all these informations for public to look at. OWASP and other things like the CVE type of things. They publish all the vulnerabilities, all the weaknesses, and so that institution, these organizations actually come from private sectors and research and education institutions also. So it needs all the sectors to get together, all the might and strength and intelligence and all that stuff to be able to fight the bad guys.
Well, Sara, you mentioned policy. So we know that President Biden has a CHIP initiative, or the CHIP Act, as it's called. Will that help us to be more secure? Is there anything in there that really focuses in on cybersecurity?
The CHIP Act. I'm not super familiar with the CHIPS Act. I do know that it has to do with enhancing security around help me out here.
Oh yeah, so I was part of this company called TSMC. It's not very well-known company, but all the cell phones chips probably made by this company called TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. I worked for them for 5 years. And the challenge is that in the whole stack of security, it spans all the way from software, application software down to the chips. If your chip is compromised, no matter what cybersecurity scheme you have, all these software protections, all these buffer overflow detections, nothing will work, because once you have a backdoor in the hardware, that's the end of the day, basically. So this is why it is important to also look to make sure that there's no backdoors in the hardware, in a sense. There was a Bloomberg report about a few years back saying that this company called Supermicro, who makes these motherboards for these servers, and Apple's and Google's and all these big companies has using their motherboards to build data centers. And they said that it detected a bug. A bug is a hardware Trojan or backdoor on the board. And once it's there are ways to get the information out, basically.
Okay, are we ready to go to questions? Okay.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. My name is Nicholas. I'm a software engineer, but I'm not a security expert. In my view, like Social Security brought that. When my child was born, they got a Social Security number. And it is encryption. It's a 9-digit, great technology for 1930s. We're in 1924. Should the government be issuing private publicly to every citizen as they're born? And maybe you can explain that to people. Issuing what? Private and public key. So I can, that when you get message or anything from me, I am really me, because I was issued not a Social Security number, which is just 9-digit, but a sequence, which is currently impossible to crack, right? Or very hard, let's say.
That's a fascinating idea.
So we already,
I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I don't know the answer.
Yeah, we already have that, right? In the sense that every website has a public key, and then every time we visit that website, we are also, when you go in, your device has a public key, your phones, yeah, so that's a privacy issue then. It's whether or not people are willing to do that. Yeah, because you can authenticate authenticate all the things that you send out, right?
It's an interesting idea, for sure.
I was just happy when they stopped putting my social security number on my student ID card.
Okay, another question.
I was just wondering if you could explain at like a foundational level what the dark web is. When I hear the dark web talked about, I think of like the black market, and I think about this episode of Family Guy where Peter, who's like the main character, and his wife go to this like physical market to like buy passports. And so yeah, I was just wondering, like, is it something that we should, as like just like the general public, engage? Is that something that we can like monitor ourselves? Should we leave it to the experts?
I'd like you to answer this, but let me just take a shot at it. It's not an expert at the technical aspects of it, but you have to use specialized software to get to the dark web. But it was started by, as I understand it, the intelligence community, because you could go in there anonymously and communicate and actually have secret agents giving secret information across continents and so forth. And these wise guys, this one guy who I interviewed, got the bright idea, well, if you can go in there anonymously and you can communicate with all these people, we can start selling drugs. And that's where it started. It became a huge drug trafficking market. But then my guide said, well, if you could sell marijuana, then you can also sell stolen IDs. And it became just a black market on the web. I don't recommend that anybody who doesn't know what they're doing go on it. It's a scary place. When he took us on it, I'm like, I'm never going on this, like, because you don't know what you're doing, and they do, and I don't recommend it. But all of the stuff, I mean, you should go on YouTube and Google. There's a lot of videos that explain this and show it safely because you're just watching. And to my mind, the solution to this threat that your information's on the black market, it's all about monitoring, right? I have one checking account, and the bank tells me whenever anybody, including myself, writes a check. Same with my credit cards, two-factor authentication. There are some simple things you can do where freezing your credit. There's just a list, right? We give people this list and say, if you haven't done all these things, that's fine, but do one or two of them, and you'll feel empowered and not so afraid. So much of the time, we don't need more stress in this world, right? And your chances are good that you'll be safe if you start monitoring. And some people say, well, does that mean I should get this ID theft monitoring service for $28.95? I don't think you need it. I mean, some people like to go out to eat and have somebody do the cooking, and other people make their own meals. I think you can do a couple simple monitoring things, and you'll be fine. So, my message of hope.
Yeah, I don't have much to, but I do agree you shouldn't get on dark web. It's kind of a scary place, definitely, yeah. And,
Sounds scary.
Got another question back here, Paul.
Hi, my name is Kino Chu. I'm a student at South Seattle in a program called Year Up, and I was just wondering, how would you get into cybersecurity?
Great questions. Come visit WSU Everett. Yeah.
You set him up to say
Yeah. Please leave your name and contact information. I'll talk to you. We have a very interesting and exciting programs. It is really a computer science program specialized in cybersecurity. You have the training of any computer science students, but you specialize in trying to learn about how people hack, and so you can protect, right? You have to be, you have to think like a hacker to be able to protect.
We set up a lot of opportunities for you to learn how to hack.
It is another optimistic point. 20 years ago, and I was trying to talk about cybersecurity or fraud, law enforcement wouldn't give me the time of day. It is the hottest topic. I mean, and the job market is just absolutely, I'm trying to get my daughter to go into it. She's not interested. I'm like, yeah, but there's jobs everywhere.
Next question.
Dustin, did you want to ask a question?
Okay.
Doug, what's on your list? We've got freeze your credit, set up the call blocking. What are the other things we as individuals can do to take responsibility?
I have a list in my briefcase, which I can give. I'm not sure off the top of my head. I can. Freeze credit, two-factor authentication. Be careful on public Wi-Fi. Don't do your banking on public Wi-Fi unless you have a virtual private network.
Even that is not secure.
Even that's not secure, he tells me. Nothing's secure, apparently. What else? What am I thinking?
The little things like even in the airport, I don't trust the USB plug.
I don't either, yeah.
I don't plug my cell phone.
No,
with
that's a legitimate fear.
Yeah.
Go paperless.
Yeah.
You know, the old school ID theft thing is that everyone on my block still has an unlocked mailbox, and they get their mail in their mailbox. I'm like, and I've told them about this. We even filmed an ID theft video about 10 years ago on my street where my son was breaking into the mailboxes on the video, and the neighbors come out and say, what are you doing? Why is your, you know, they still do this. We interviewed ID thieves who they hire meth addicts who go around and steal your mail. So going paperless means the mail doesn't ever come, right? There's nothing to steal. I don't get any mail.
Does that leave you more vulnerable online, though?
Well, this is the dilemma. Another thing is password manager. I'm starting to remember these. Get a password manager. Do you know what that is? Software that will, and you go down this list, and at some point, someone will stop you with that question and say, well, if I get a password manager, or if everything's online, then if it's somebody gets into the password manager, then they have everything, right? You have to trust someone, and the encryption on these things gets better and better. And I always have said that the scammers, all criminals, look for the path of least resistance. So if you put up any resistance at all, your chances of being victimized are much less. That's the point of this hardening the target thing. The guys that I've interviewed, they're like, I could do it, but why bother when there's all these other people who will just tell me they'll open the door to their entire security world voluntarily with a few flowery words, you know? So that's what I mean, just like put up enough resistance that it's just too much of a pain.
I want to add a little bit about password manager thing. Is it okay?
Sure.
I'm actually a person don't trust password managers because I thought that they will be hacked also. So I usually have two algorithms to generate password myself in my head. And then these are algorithms that are not that difficult. I mean, it will be catchy phrases like little red fox jumping over the fence or whatever like that. And then
somebody's going to hack you.
I mean, this is just a simple example. You'll be something that you can remember, and you have a scheme to take characters out of it. For example, the first letter of the first word, second letter of the second word, third letter of the third word, like that, and you would generate a pretty long password that is pretty random. And then every time you have to change it, you would add another word or add a number to it. Basically, what I'm saying is that I have an algorithm to generate passwords, and I stored it in here. You know, that's the safest place.
You don't write it down at all? I have 200.
That's tough writing it down.
I write the algorithm down, but not the not.
What if you have like 150 internet accounts?
So usually I have two groups. So one is the casual internet accounts that I have passwords for, and I have another set of groups that I use for financial things.
That actually makes a lot of sense.
And then you have different algorithms for each type of account.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
That's a great.
Very interesting.
Thank you. So the last 10 minutes, you've been doing education. And so for those of us that are faced with the technical details of trying to solve these problems, what do you think we can do to improve education for the general public? Maybe the educational area, but also just parental education, those sorts of things. Great example on Twitter, you see all the time tweets, take the year you were born and add these numbers and it'll do something fun, or what's your favorite color? And these are all phishing that people don't realize. You've done some great education here, but it's to a very small audience. How do we actually make cybersecurity education a priority at home and in universities elementary schools, those places. What can we do to improve that? Thank you.
I mean, I think the first thing that comes to mind is the onus really lives on us to educate our kids and our loved ones and family members around the risks that are out there. And it really just starts with the individual. I think I came in or listened to the previous panel and on a similar vein, it really does come down to self-awareness and self-education, and then leading by example.
We have to spread the words, and universities needs to educate educators. I think there's a responsibility from people who are technical oriented to at least offer these type of services one way or the other. Yeah. So this again on March 2nd, we have this Girls Exploring stand. Welcome, parents send their kids over. We will try to educate a little bit about the importance of protecting protecting your informations, and simple things about just knowing encryptions, how encryptions works, and then how we can use some of the technology to protect you.
You have this problem. It's called the illusion of invulnerability. I'm too smart to fall for any of this. That's a big problem. And what we started to do was to get in a room of 200 seniors and say, none of you who came to this workshop are likely to fall prey to scams, because you go to workshops and you're always learning. But if you aren't going to fall for it, you all know someone who will. So please listen to the information, not for yourself, but to warn someone else. And you're sort of doing an end run around their own illusion, because they'll learn it that way for someone else. I don't know if it works, but that's the idea.
Okay, Alicia, the last question.
More of a statement. Thank you for being here. No, this was a great topic. This whole thing was, and I think about, I live in Edmonds, and recently in Edmonds, the mailman was robbed and took the mail keys. So there's a good chunk of the population in Edmonds right now that's feeling pretty vulnerable because there's someone out there that can get into their locked mailboxes. So I share that to say is that this impacts all of us on some level. So education is a great part of making sure that we're repeating it, putting it out there. Maybe that's where we go back to trusted media, and hopefully they're giving us good information and not disinformation around this topic. So again, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation, and I hope that you will join us next month for the other half of this conversation around artificial intelligence, and it's going to be a doozy. So registration is open right now, so do that. And then in April, we have a very special Civic Cocktail where we're going to launch our youth council. So that's going to be really fun, really interesting. So yeah, so we want to make sure that they are giving their input on these topics as well. So again, on behalf of the City Club staff, volunteers, Bermuda's Media, Collective Seattle, our technology partner, WTIA, thank you everyone. Our guests will still be here to answer any questions that you were not able to get in. So we'll see you next month.